Hello universe, Josh here. Today I want to talk about art, and specifically I want to argue that art should be apolitical or a-religious. It shouldn't have, how do I say it? Art shouldn't be biased. And I include poetry, and this will go as a response to my poetry, the video where I held up a card with poetry because that was important to me. So I'm going to argue along the lines that art and poetry and all other forms of artistic expression should definitely not have political bias, not have religious bias. It should just be pure art. The reason for this is that art is imprecise. Anytime you have poetry or a painting or something to that effect, it's always open to interpretation as to what the message that the artist is intending to bring to his audience. And in that sense, an artist claiming to have a message really has a very tough time ahead of him convincing everyone of what his message actually is, because if he's not around to explain his art or whatever, his or her, it's hard to bring your message across in art. And it's hard to have a strong, concrete, political or religious message in art. So I think it should be avoided. Actually, I would go so far as to say that art cannot be solid, and you can never show any real message. You can't convince anyone of a new position, say a religious faith or a political ideology, with a work of art, with a poem or with a painting, or even with a combination, even with an amalgamation of many different kinds of work. You have nothing. It's still ultimately up to the person viewing, the receiver of the art, to make a decision as to what it means to them. And now this is why I don't think you should try and put political biases into your art, because it just doesn't work. But furthermore, it shouldn't be encouraged in public spaces by religious organizations, by political organizations, I guess schools and universities and whatever other organizations are rather public. They shouldn't be encouraging works of art. They should be encouraging communication. Art needs to have as wide an appeal as possible. It has to permeate all of society in order to do the most good. If you're an artist and you want to do a lot of good, you should try and reach the widest audience possible to give them pleasure or enjoyment out of your works of art. Presumably that's what people want out of art, poetry, painting, sculpture, etc. They want to view it and feel good in viewing it. There's an intrinsic value in art. However, if art becomes political and has a bias, then some of that beauty is distorted, and it's overshadowed by the communication of the message, and the pureness of the art is lost, and it's not as enjoyable, and also it runs the risk of being avoided in certain circles, like philosophy. Say, if someone thinks that someone else might not agree with your message, then they will perhaps pass over your work of art. And not only have you denied a part of the world the pleasure of your art by including your message in it, but you've denied yourself possible income, and you've denied yourself recognition. You've denied yourself the satisfaction of knowing that people got enjoyment out of your work of art. Therefore, art, and now I'm not saying art should be bland. I think art can be beautiful and colorful and absolutely stunning, and it can have a real impact. But art it doesn't need a message, and it shouldn't even have a message in it. The artist should always strive to be as middle of the road as possible and not imbue any message into the art besides, this is beautiful, look at this. I might even take that to the extreme. I know not all artists would, but I would say that only abstract art is good. Only art which doesn't have a whole bunch of distracting Baroque elements in it, like various figures and tropes that are supposed to represent things. Art needs to be one thing to one thing, and they shouldn't even be things, really, to be honest. They should be ideas, they should be feelings, they shouldn't be representative of people necessarily, except in a fairly neutral manner, like or a picture of a child, a generic child maybe, or a picture of a person doing something rather mundane and everyday. I would avoid depictions of war and battle and soldiers because of the political and religious implications. However, I think there can be some leniency for that, because an essence of war is the feeling, and it doesn't necessarily have to be political. It doesn't have to be this side versus that side. So as long as it doesn't have a message of who is right and who is wrong, I'm okay with the message of, war in general is bad, because that's a kind of a universal human feeling. Sometimes it's necessary, of course, but in general, nobody likes war and fighting and blood. Really, like people, well, that's the thing. People do enjoy it in works of art. Of course, I think that's also degenerate, and that's a sign of an imperfect character if you enjoy that sort of art, and if you tend to subscribe to that sort of view, the ugly, scary side of humanity is that which you should be focusing on. Okay, so what I'm saying is distinguish art from communication. The risk with art is that if you try to communicate through art, it will be distorted and your message will reach the wrong people because they're looking for something else, and it's kind of like spam, I guess, in some ways, or advertisements on television. It's not really, like, they might look artistic, but they have an agenda behind them, and people are genuinely annoyed when they have to change the channel because there's commercials, and when the show that they want to watch is being interrupted by art, or supposed art, which is commercials, not really art at all, which are for products that they have no interest in. So that's the risk with art with a message, is it will reach the wrong audience, and it will annoy people. And the reason I say you don't want to do that is because it will affect your reputation, and if people are annoyed at you, that word gets out, and people, you lose popularity, and ultimately you do lose something of value, such as you might lose income, or you might be not as successful as you wanted to be. So if you're trying to communicate while you're using art, you're using this. Art is the wrong tool for the job. If you want to communicate, use your words, use your language skills, use your debating skills, use your arguments. Don't paint it up all pretty and or in a fancy package, because people will just be looking at the package and they won't be looking what you're actually saying. And besides, what you're actually saying will be distorted by the package that you've put it in. So when you really do want to communicate, such as in religion and politics and philosophy and even marketing, even commercialization, in the business world, don't use art. That's the field, those are the fields where communication is important. Art has its own place, and it needs to be accessible to all, and it needs to be art for its own sake, so that people can actually enjoy it, and feel something from it. I think that's all I had to say on that subject, and I hope you agree with me. So, bye for now.